Morning. Morning.
Hope you had enough coffee this morning, and if you haven't, go ahead and help yourself to some more. We want you to make yourself at home here at 360. Welcome to 360 Church today. We're going to do something a little bit different. Normally we have like one speaker, but we thought we're going to share a little bit about a really important transition that someday either some of you have already made or you're going to make one of these days. You never know. But the thing is that there's so many different transitions that we make in our lives, and we've talked about several of these. But one of the most important and the most significant transition that you can make is from being single to being married. Now, when I was single, I was so anxious. I wasn't nervous at all. I was so anxious to get married because my husband Earl, of course, is here. My husband Earl and I, we had been apart for so long, and so I was just like, oh, can we get this over with? Can we just get married and get on with it and be together? And so I was so excited. And so I'm getting my wedding together, making the flowers, doing all these arrangements, and just so happy to be married and so happy that this is going to happen. But what I didn't know, I have to say I was really naive, because what I didn't know was the adjustment that was going to happen, and the adjustment that I was going to make, and the adjustment that happens when two people become one. And so what happens? My question is once you're married, and have you watched that reality show, Say Yes to the Dress? Anybody watch that? Or anybody will admit that they watched that? Actually, I watched that for the first time. And then you just get addicted to that. And so obviously I didn't have the Kleinfield team to help me out, but I did say yes to my dress. And so what happens though, once you have your dress and you have everything, or for guys, you have your tux. What happens after you say yes to the dress? Or yes to the suit. Now some people are asked, is this a leisure suit? No, this isn't a leisure suit. My brother wore one to our wedding. But this is a regular suit. So tell them, Earl, tell them about the suit.
In 1976, on this beautiful May day, I was a vision in pale blue polyester with white shoes and a white belt, which actually would be very fashion forward in certain neighborhoods today, but it then was just as it looks. Jen was lovely. My memories of this day are just a blur. I feel like it's a post-traumatic stress situation or something. I don't remember anything about the day. So this picture kind of captures how we looked on that day. The getting married is easy. You can do it about anywhere. It's the being married that is the tricky part of the transition. And we thought if we were going to do a month on transitions, we really couldn't skip this and be for real. And there are a couple reasons for that. One is that if you're a single person, being married is certainly no requirement. You're a whole person just by yourself in God's eyes, no matter what your status is. But it's just going to happen to you probably. By the time you're middle-aged, if you live in the United States, your odds of having a spouse are 95%. So not talking about this would be like knowing there's an asteroid coming from space to smash the planet and not saying anything about it. Because it really just is probably going to happen. Although ironically, the Bible recommends being single as a better, easier lifestyle. Because it says once you get married, you have issues you have to work through. So there's a lot of feel good on both sides of it, which is what I really like about the biblical position on this. And the other thing is that doing this is really expensive in this country. Our average wedding in the United States costs $27,000. Our average wedding will have 141 guests. Now, if you do the math, that's $200 per person just to show up at the wedding and the reception. So I'm thinking somebody better be coming up with some microwave ovens at the reception here, some pretty big gifts, because we're into these people for a ton of cash. The average reception band is $3,000. So I think you'd agree with us that for that kind of investment, it might be good to pay attention to this because it is really costly in a lot of ways. Would you want to get marriage advice from the single guy who wrote you from jail? No. Well, here's the second irony. That's exactly where we're going today for our advice on the transition into marriage. His name was Paul. He was single. In fact, in the Bible, he complains about not having a wife, which is so funny. He's in jail, probably in Rome. It's late middle of the 1st century, and he's concerned about this group of Christians in a Roman provincial capital called Ephesus. It's a city in western Turkey. And so he wrote them a letter, and in this letter, he's a lot concerned about love and keeping love alive in their faith community. And one of the ways he approaches that is talking about love as being the thing that brings walls down between people, between slave and free, Jew and Gentile, male and female, and ultimately between husbands and wives. So if the walls are down in a relationship, love has a chance. If you have walls, love never has a chance, no matter which dress you said yes to. So today we're going to look into the passage that's on the back of your program. Some of it will also appear on the screen. It's from Ephesians chapter 5. And we're going to focus on the last 3 verses of it. But this is Paul's running start into our look today at the transition into marriage. In chapter 5, verse 22, he says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands." So women, are you ready to submit? Yes, I suspected that. So you read these words, and honestly, from a Western 21st century perspective, you just want to throw your hands up, don't you? And go, I mean, I read that, and honestly, you know what I feel as a man? A ton of pressure. Because if my wife is to submit to me in the sense of slavish devotion, as obviously you've seen Janet do with me, then that means I have to be as right on everything as God is on everything. That's a recipe for therapy, or at least strong medication, to get to that. So if that's what we're talking about here, are we really saying, you would be willing to move to the city that your husband wants to live in, even though you hate living there, just because he says that that's what we should do? Is that kind of what we're talking about here? And then just when you think the pressure couldn't be any worse, he keeps writing. And he says this, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water and the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing." Now that's what I call saying yes to the dress. "That she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body." So the first part asks me, are you ready to submit to your husband? And then this part seems to pose a question to men, which says, are you ready to sacrifice everything for your wife? And, guys will say, even my big screen TV? I mean, what about my weekends mountain biking in the forest without her? We're in touch with cultures where husbands and wife take separate vacations. I think largely to get away from each other. So are you saying that I have to forsake my big promotion so that my wife can more likely be in an environment where she would thrive? You mean I actually have to do things? So when there's a spider crawling around in the kitchen sink, I have to get up in the middle of the night and kill it?
That's right.
Do I have to sacrifice? The first paragraph says I have to be as smart as God, so I'm worth following. And the second paragraph says anything good I get in my life, I have to give up for her. So what's the deal here? Why is this? How can this all possibly fit together? I think what this passage is saying to us is that In one way, the transition into marriage changes everything. And in another way, it doesn't change anything. It changes everything and nothing at the same time. Let's look at the last few verses. Verse 31 says, therefore, here's where he begins to bring it all together. He's quoting Genesis in a passage that probably a big percentage of the human race knows at this point. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound. There is the biggest understatement in the scripture. This mystery is profound. The relationship is a mystery. Everyone who has one knows this to be true. It is profound. And I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Everything changes when you make the transition into marriage. If that were not true, men wouldn't insist on not getting married as often as they insist on it, because they see that train coming. They know where it's going. So men are big advocates of sort of pulling up short of this, because they sense that whole spider thing. I don't know if I want to do that, you know. I don't know if I'm really ready for the level of sacrifice that it calls for, because they can tell that this is really going to turn into a big deal. And the other issue that concerns people is that if we do this, aren't we just kind of setting ourselves up for marital dissolution, for a divorce one day? And sometimes those things happen. There are some relationships that are not survivable for a variety of reasons, and so that just takes place. But the truth is that if you listen to what people tell you, you'll get the idea that half of all marriages end in divorce, which is a simple comparison of the rate of marriage per 1,000 people versus the rate of divorce per 1,000 people, and the ratio is about 2 to 1. But if you back out the pool of already married people, you back out the people who are remarrying, and you back out the people who are remarrying someone they just divorced, which happens more often than you would think, we see it in our business, the rate falls from 50% to 33%. And if you are a female over the age of 25 with a bachelor's degree, you know what your odds of a lifetime marriage are? 80%. Which means, I could roll the dice on that. How many things in life are as certain as 80%? That's not so bad. And a lot of folks are in that circle of experience here today. So that's kind of a thing to feel good about. Everything changes when you get married. Now, what exactly is it that changes? For me, I think the most powerful change is that we change metaphors for what this relationship means. We go from one kind of guiding image that says it's about a husband and a wife to what Paul says here in verses 31 through 33, where the metaphor really is the relationship of Jesus to the church. And the answer to the question, how does a marriage work, is the same as the answer to the question, how does the relationship between Jesus and the church work? This is the mystery that is profound. And really, it's a very simple thing. He, out of love, laid down everything for us, and we, out of love, return respect to Jesus. That's why we collectively, if we're following Jesus as our Lord, are known as the bride of Christ. It's a beautiful kind of an image. And so as he's poured out his life for us, a husband pours out his life for his wife, and in Paul's phrase here, she returns respect for him. So it's not a slave and master relationship, it's a love, respect relationship. And that changes everything in two specific ways. One way is, when you get married, you have to share.
That's right. Yes.
And that sharing is all inclusive and comprehensive down to the level of your French fries.
I always want his fries instead of getting my own when we first got married. And my husband would say, well, you know, I'll get you some fries. No, I just want a couple. So, yeah, that was always the way we did it.
And the bad man in me wants to eat them all. Because if I had only wanted a small fry, I would have ordered a small order of French fry. And since men seem to, at least in the culture that I'm from, kind of establish their identity through separation and distance, if you ask for 2 of my fries, you're stepping on my stuff here. You're encroaching on my territory, you're over my boundaries just a little bit, and when I feel that pressure, that whole smothering thing, I want to run away. You know, I want to distance myself so there's no fries. And this is how men end up in McDonald's at 2 a.m. eating fries alone. That's where it goes. I'm warning you, man. That's where that attitude goes. So as a man, I do not want to share anything, not with other men. I don't want to share credit. I don't want to share toothbrushes. I don't want to. And when you get married, you're sharing bathrooms and laundry detergent, and there's so many loads of dishes to be washed. Holy cow! 36 years of dishes is our track record, and you're all in on both of those things, and as a result, you end up having to constantly work through the question of who is going to yield. Now, we found this issue on the question of toothpaste. This is what I prefer. This is Pepsodent. This brand has been around since early in the 20th century. This tube it's got heft. It's like a pound of paste. It's a ton of paste, right? And it has what you need, which is it's loaded with fluoride, which kills the stuff that creates cavities. And it's white, and it's packed with diatoms, which are the things that your toothbrush uses as an abrasive to scrub all of the enamel off of your dental work. And what I like about this is that this costs $1. This is dollar toothpaste. My wife prefers this. This is something more like $5 toothpaste. And it is, I have to be honest with you, it's 50% bleach. It really is. This is all about tooth whitening. It's subtle, it's nuanced, it's chemical. It has a variety of ingredients in there which work magically to make your teeth as white as those people that you see in movies and television, which are shocking. You know, they have the artificially tanned skin and then the bright white teeth, really quite zombie-like and creepy. But this is what Jan likes. Now this is Crest 3D white. So in all 3 dimensions, this is going to get you white, and possibly even including time travel. And so when we got married, we had to resolve this conflict if we were going to share a life. And hon, would you show them how we resolved it?
This is our toothpaste.
From home. This is what we used this morning.
It's almost gone.
So the transition is from the 2-tube life down to the 1-tube life. You're ready to get married when you're ready to do that. You know that when you get married, you stand in front of us, you don't say, I do. That's not actually in the ceremony. You say, I will. I will go down from 2 to 1. I will pour out my life from my wife. And in response, she always respects me whenever I make a move in that direction. The other big change is exclusivity. This massive, comprehensive sharing down to the tiniest detail, but within an exclusive relational envelope. Part of the sharing that you have in marriage is physical sharing of each other's bodies. The scripture says that husbands and wives actually own each other's bodies physically. And so marriage is the arena for the expression of that kind of love between people. But that sharing is in an exclusive circle, which means that you don't flirt. You just don't. You don't do BFFs of the opposite sex. You're not texting another woman at 3 a.m. You are completely and utterly limited to this primary commitment, and especially its sexual component, being exclusively with just this other person. Just one toothpaste. And that changes everything because it is the decision to have no other options. I'm not on eHarmony. Jan's not on chemistry.com.
I'm glad that you're not on eHarmony.
Because those days are completely behind us because we're down to just the one tube of toothpaste. And so to step into this arena is to decide, this is the person I'm ready to lay my life down for. And in turn, to receive love and respect as a response to that sacrifice. If I'm not ready to do that sacrifice, I don't have any rights to expect any respect back. It's just not going to be there. Even if it should be there, it just won't be there because I'm not doing the things that I need to do. So it changes everything. And it also changes nothing. And that's where Jan's going to come in now.
Now, some things change, as we talked about, but some things stay the same. And you all know this, but I'll just remind you that when you get married, you still have problems. And I have to say, when I was engaged, I think there's part of me that I felt all my problems would go away. Because after all, I'm married, I found the one. Of course, what's not to like? But I found out that my problems just followed me. You know, like when you go for a job and you have this resume, you said, I did this and this and this. Well, you bring your resume into your marriage, and you have all the, yes, this happened and that, yeah, and I did this, and this happened and that, this is my problem, I have this pattern, this habit, and whatever. So you bring all this stuff into your marriage. And and those of you, if you're single here today, or even married, especially if you're single, this is a great opportunity to work on your stuff, because it's not going to change when you get married. So you have this marvelous opportunity to work on all your baggage. You know, we bring in so much stuff, anger and all of these dysfunctional behaviors, and so you have this great opportunity to work on this. And I like what Henry Cloud, he has this book called How to Get a Date Worth Keeping, and he has some really good things to say. And he says that what you do is you look at your current behavior, just look at your current and where it's going to lead, and then you just and see if you like the end result. So what am I doing now, and where's this going to lead? And so you get this chance to kind of work on these things. And his thought is, you don't resolve conflict, you just work on your friendship. And then if you work on your friendship, then that'll just take care of the conflict. And the other thing is, marriage, doesn't change you. Like I said, and the thing is too, if for instance, if I'm afraid of flying, which I have been, I'm still afraid of flying when I'm with you. And so none of that changes. The other thing is, here's a surprising thought, and I'm sure some of you already know this, is that, your spouse, marriage doesn't change your spouse. In other words, you can't get married in hopes that you will change your spouse, and that's such an idealistic thing. And I hear this from people like, well, he'll change when we get married, or she'll change when we get married, and some supernatural thing is just going to come upon us, and we'll just have this wonderful relationship. Well, it doesn't really happen, because you can't change your spouse. Only God can change that. And so here's the "Don't Marry a Jerk" section of our talk. Whatever, if this guy, if he's abusing you, and if he's abusive while you're dating, he's going to be that way even more so when you're married. You know, if a guy's with this girl, she's controlling you, she's bossing you around when you're engaged or you're going with her, she's going to do that when you get married. And it works both ways. And so, but keep in mind that you marry who you date. And I know of people who I know who have thought for some reason, they've seen these behaviors and they've married these individuals anyway, and they've really regretted it. And part of it is maybe if you're suffering with low self-esteem, sometimes you make really poor decisions. And so this is a time to just ask the Lord to help you with this, because most of the time that this happens is because women just don't feel good enough about themselves. So they don't feel like they're worth somebody who treats them. So you have to ask them, just ask, the question is, how's this guy treating me? And so you can't, the other thing is, the person you marry, their personality is not going to change. You know, you can't be God in your marriage. You know, only God can be God. For instance, I found out so much how different Earl and I were. You know, I knew we were different, you know, in many ways, but when we got married, I really found out our differences. For instance, my husband is an indoors guy, and I'm an outdoors person. I spent my childhood camping. I lived outside on summer log, and we roughed it, and I was, hiking. That's what I'm all about, nature and everything. Now my husband, he's an indoors guy. He loves, his idea of camping is being in a man cave, you know, with the Pittsburgh Steelers on and several snacks and his diet Pepsi. That's his idea of camping. So we have two different ways of looking at life. And so the other thing is I noticed is that my husband was a morning person, and I am not a morning person. I'm a little better now, but I was an evening person. So when we first got married, he'd get up and he'd be so cheerful, it's so annoying, so cheerful and and talkative and bright, and I would be like, it took me, I had to have all these several cups of coffee just to utter one sentence. And so it was very annoying. And so you have these things that are you're just blindsided by till you start living together and you say, oh wow, what is this? And so here's what really happens is you can't change your spouse. You can't change anything that they do or what their preferences are, and we are so different. But what's important is that is to learn how to accept your spouse, and those of you who are married today, you can start this as a pattern. Accept your spouse, and you can start to strengthen your friendship, and you can start to focus on each other's positive qualities and have positive feelings for each other. And so this has been really it's criticism, and it's so tempting, and criticism is just deadly to a relationship, and so how much more is it deadly to a marriage? And so I love to just think about all the positive the qualities of Earl, and there's just so many of them. I don't have time to go into them all, but just keep in mind that God can do these wonderful things in your marriage, and there's no perfect marriage. You don't have to be perfect, but it's just that that's why Paul put this model of husbands. He wasn't asking husbands to be perfect. He's asking them to love their wives. He's not asking wives to be perfect. He's asking us to respect our husbands. And finally, what stays the same? Well, God does. God does not change. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and forever. So even if maybe whether you're single or you're married, or maybe you made mistakes, maybe you have regrets, maybe you've been in a relationship that's broken and you're heartbroken over that. God never leaves you. He says he'll never forsake you, and he'll be with you no matter what happens. And when I was thinking about this talk, I was thinking about all the, even though God stays the same, all the new things that He wants to put in us and He wants to do for us. And so if you've been hurt in a relationship, your life isn't over. You don't have to throw in the towel. God has so many great things ahead of you. And I just saw a friend of mine a couple weeks ago at a conference, and what happened to her, she was married her first marriage was probably at least 20 years ago, and her husband just decided he didn't want to be married to her anymore. And she was just devastated, and there were several reasons for that, and she was just devastated, and she was a believer, and she really had a call of God in her life, and I can't tell you how much it's devastated her. And so she still served God for years and years, and she kept telling me whenever I'd see her, I really want God to send somebody new in my life. I really want to get married again. And she just had this desire in her that she wanted to be married again. And so years went by, and I'd pray for her, nothing happened. A few more years went by, nothing would happen. And she still keeps saying she had this vision that she just needed somebody. And so finally I'm on Facebook, and I see this her picture, and here she is. She has her this guy that she met, and they're getting married. And what happened was it was somebody who knew him, and they were able to make this connection and go out on a date, and it just was almost like magic. This man in her life just loved her kids, went to all her places of ministry, went to hear her preach, and he's an accountant. And so just when we went to this conference, about a month ago, I finally had coffee with her, and she described how happy she just glowed. And so I met this man, and he was a great guy. And so it just shows you that that it's not over. Whatever marital status you're in, that the kingdom of God, is not about word. It's not in word, but in power. And so I'm believing today that with God's power in your life, when you're single, when you're married, your marriage, that He has this immense power this morning to restore you, restore your relationship, or to bring more power into your marriage. And so that's what we want to. That's what I want to think you to think about today is, not to dwell on all your mistakes. Or I shouldn't have married this person, or I shouldn't have went out with that person, or I should have done this, or I should have done that, or maybe you're thinking about past mistakes in your marriage. And I think God just this morning that He just wants to do just a new thing, and He wants to bring power into your life.
We'd like to have all of you stand, if you would, please, with us, and have our band come and lead us into some worship. And as we do, we're going to have some of the leaders from the church here